Politics in the case of a 10-year-old rape victim. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. In this day and age, everything is partisan, everything is political, even the rape of a 10-year-old girl. In late June, the Indianapolis Star reported that a 10-year-old girl from Ohio traveled to Indiana to get an abortion because she was not eligible under Ohio's new 6-week abortion ban, a law that does not have an exception for rape or incest. Abortion rights supporters seized on the story to show the consequences of the end of Roe and Ohio's new law. Among them, President Biden.
Just last week, it was reported that a 10-year-old girl was a rape victim in Ohio, 10 years old. And she was forced to have to travel out of the state to Indiana to seek to terminate the presidency and maybe save her life.
Then Republicans took it a step further by casting doubt on whether the story was even true. After all, no one had yet been charged. Congressman Jim Jordan tweeted it was a lie, and Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost expressed skepticism on Fox News.
So, Dave, have you had anybody come to you in your state to say we're looking into this? A police report was filed?
Not a whisper. And we work closely with we have a decentralized law enforcement system in Ohio, but we have regular contact with prosecutors and local police and sheriffs. Not a whisper anywhere. Something maybe even more telling, Jesse, is my office runs the state crime lab. Any case like this, you're going to have a rape kit, you're going to have biological evidence, and you would be looking for DNA analysis, which we do most of the DNA analysis in Ohio. There is no case request for analysis that looks anything like this.
Well, it turns out Yost's office likely did not get a request because Columbus Police has its own crime lab and does its own rape kit testing. And this week, Columbus Police charged a 27-year-old man with raping a 10-year-old girl who then went to Indiana to obtain an abortion. Andrew Tobias, what is Dave Yost saying now?
So Yost is a former newspaper reporter, and I think he kind of enjoys playing ombudsman every once in a while. So he kind of made it seem like that's what he was doing. Of course, he's also a partisan. He said in an interview with one of my colleagues that he was trying to change the subject a little bit. But what he basically says now is that he's reacting to the information that was available at the time, and that, another interesting element that's been introduced to this is now that you see some Ohio Republicans, including Yost, arguing that the heartbeat bill law does not prohibit an abortion in this case. There's some language about, I'm not sure of the exact verbiage, but involving protecting the life of the mother and that kind of thing. And so they said that may have applied here because of the girl's age, but clearly that was not understood by her parents. A lot of physicians who talk about this are concerned about ambiguities like that. So I'm not sure it's all clear, as they might say. We'll get to that legal matter in a moment. But Terry, my wife gives me a lot of advice, as I'm sure yours does as well. One piece of advice she gives me is when you're digging a hole, put the shovel down. Should Dave Yost have put the shovel down instead of saying, look, this is not, I didn't say anything wrong, I didn't say anything inaccurate, when clearly he was suggesting that this story was false.
Right, and one of the confusions is on these kind of cases, there's a time lag in when it's reported officially until there's actually an arraignment. So a lot of people did say we didn't see anything about it, but there actually is a small technical reason for the delay. And there was other people, including the Washington Post, did a big story on this, raising these questions. But obviously, as we move into the post period of the Supreme Court ruling, we're going to have lots of ambiguities, questions, confusions. And part of it also, you've got both sides trying to politicize the issue, raise money off of it. So welcome to maybe not every week, but maybe every other week, we're going to be talking about abortion one way or the other.
Derek, now the president turned out to be correct that this case did happen, and he expressed his outrage about it, but he still brought it to his attention. When the president speaks, it really pumps up the volume. Do Democrats, can they be accused of also playing politics with this a little bit?
Well, first off, it's a very sad situation for the young lady that's involved and her family. Politics is prevalent in everything, and for the Attorney General to say that he hasn't heard anything about it when he's the top law enforcement official in the state, you know, that can be questioned a little bit. I mean, he is the top law enforcement official in the state. In a case like this, where you had a 10-year-old girl involved, that almost certainly would have gotten to his office somehow.
But police were investigating, Andy. Sometimes they keep things close to the vest so they don't lose a suspect, they don't impinge on information. Could he have just jumped the gun? Or did he get caught up in the talking point fest there?
It almost seems like what you mentioned, President Joe Biden going out there and putting it in the forefront really brought out other Republicans to sort of push back on that. And I think that's when you started seeing the ramp up of Republicans casting doubt, just like we saw with Dave Yost. Another thing that's been pointed out here in all of this is the idea that even if the case weren't true, or even if they weren't able to verify the case through police reports and court documents, there are plenty of abortion rights advocates out there, Democratic leaders out there who say that these are cases that do happen, whether or not that specific Indianapolis Star report did or did not happen. We know it did happen now, but there are people out there who are saying that people who are against abortion rights, people who are anti-abortion, need to face the facts that these types of situations happen where minors are raped, they become impregnated, and like Andrew said, the vagueness of the law is leaving providers scratching their heads wondering what to do.
Yeah, Terry, that's what, to pick up on that point, that this could have been a medical emergency on the part of the girl, which would have given her, under Ohio law, the right to obtain an abortion. President Biden even suggested her life was in danger, but Ohio Right to Life, in their statement, didn't say that. They just said that she was traumatized twice by the rape and then the abortion. If you're an abortion provider, are you going to take that risk? If you're a doctor, you're going to take that risk?
Well, this is part of the mystery meat that's going on, because I had a key Right to Life person tell me, oh yes, that would qualify to save the life because she was so young. In fact, I think she was raped supposedly at age 9 and then just turned 10. But then another key legislator who's a lawyer told me no, his reading of the law on the heartbeat bill would not allow that, would not consider it. So there are things that are going to have to be fine-tuned on the law, and ultimately the courts are going to have to separate it out, because you're right, doctors don't want to risk their license when the law is a little bit unclear in some of these unique cases.
Andrew, does this last? This controversy last? Does this, because the Democrats are already seizing on this as a galvanizing issue. Roe is now gone, and now these states are passing laws, more laws to come. Looking at suburban voters, suburban women voters, they see this case. Do Republicans face any backlash from that?
I think in the terms of campaigns that, this is a case that could be just exhibit A of the sort of worst case scenario of what happens when these kinds of laws exist. So I could definitely see Democrats and abortion rights advocates pointing to this case during campaign season. That being said, on the national level, I'm sure there'll be more cases like this, unfortunately. And so it's just a matter of whether it may or may not get overshadowed by something like that.
Derek, but you're still using, as an example, a 10-year-old girl, perhaps even 9, who was raped. You can't be seen as capitalizing on that awful story.
No, it's an awful story, and unfortunately, you're going to have more issues like this because you have so many different laws in different states with Roe being gone. So as these unfortunate situations continue to happen, you're gonna see unfortunate results as we're seeing here.
All right. Well, there's more abortion political news this week. There is a new effort to revive an old idea among anti-abortion activists, fetal personhood. A new bill in the Ohio House is 3 sentences long, saying what's called the Personhood Act would protect the constitutional rights of unborn human individuals from the point of conception. The bill is sponsored by State Rep Gary Click of Northern Ohio. He's a Baptist pastor. He says at the moment of conception, the person is a unique individual with their own DNA and deserving of all the rights of personhood. Terry Casey, up until this summer, bills like this really didn't get much attention. They were floated out there. Some states passed them, but because of Roe and the viability standpoint, many states just didn't act on them. Now, Roe is gone. Do we see this becoming law?
My prediction is absolutely no, it will not become law because what's drafted is so vague and unclear, and add the patina of being crazy that it's not going to go there. And I'll give you one example. If you pass this law, does that mean everybody who's pregnant can have an added tax deduction? There's a whole bunch of legal issues, but the law as written is just somebody's idea for attention, but it's going nowhere in the Ohio House and won't be passed.
Andy, I remember a day when the heartbeat law was seen as crazy.
I was going to point out the same thing. Even up to 5 years ago, there was a whole host of bills that were regularly introduced and usually cast aside as, okay, that's representing more of the extreme side of each party and won't really get a hearing, won't really see movement. But more and more over the past 5 years, we have seen movement on those bills moving further to the right. So a bill like this, where you wouldn't expect to see any momentum given to it, it's not out of the question anymore.
Andrew, could they write the bill to take into account things like taxes, census counts, riding in the HOV lanes? This pregnant woman in Dallas wants to get out of a ticket because she's 8 months pregnant and was driving, she says, with her child in this car.
You know, I read the co-sponsor request memo that went out for this bill when it was being kind of circulated before it was formally introduced. And the sponsor, Gary Click, he actually said something that he liked about it was how short it was. It really is. It's like 10 words. It's, I mean, I don't know the verbiage, but you know, all people, like all personhood, including preborn or something like that. I mean, it's just very simple. So I don't think that it's the kind of thing that would get vetted out if that's the person who's actually introducing it and arguing for it. So, but I do think what's interesting about it is that in this kind of post-Roe era, it's hard to say what the mainstream is on this because it's just for so long that she's been bottled up. And I mean, it really is, you know, it's almost like an unprecedented situation, I guess.
Derek, there's law right now. If you are in Ohio, if you murder a pregnant woman, you can be charged with killing the fetus, the unborn child. It's kind of vague as to where life begins.
Sure.
Other states say it begins at a conception. You can be charged with murder, manslaughter, or any of those variations. But it happens now. If you kill a woman who is 8 months pregnant, you're charged with 2 counts of murder.
Absolutely. You know, but to the scenario that you just gave, if you kill a woman that's 8 months pregnant, she's about to give birth to the child. You know, the question is, when is conception, right?
Yeah.
And so you're going to see all these different types of bills coming forward from well, they're basically coming from the GOP. And I guess my question is, you know, what are we doing to protect the kids that are born in this state? You know, that's the real question that we need to be asking, because we have so many kids that are not properly educated. We have an incarceration problem in this state, in this country. And I feel like the legislature should really be concentrating on what are we doing after the kids are born versus when they're not.
And I'm going to follow up with Derek and kind of second that. The one very conservative state rep I talked to today, he made the point the legislature needs to follow through and do more to help out families, children, adoption. There's a lot of legal areas where the legislature needs to focus and do more. And I think the state of Ohio has invested quite a bit of money in helping families related to these things, but obviously they got to look at, do they need to do more? Are they providing the right kind of support and help?
And did you see that happening? That takes a lot of money. And we don't want to raise taxes to provide more services for later in life, abortion services, you know, perhaps daycare services, childcare services.
Yeah, I was going to say we're kind of in an interesting situation now, too, because the legislature's on summer break. And like Andrew said, this has been a complete shift in the landscape here in Ohio when it comes to policy. There is now all of a sudden a ban on abortions as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. You would think that maybe lawmakers would have thought about coming back into session to try to clear up this kind of vagueness, to try to move on some bills that sort of address the situation further. We haven't seen that, and so now we're in a holding pattern.
Do we know why that is? There was an article this week I read, I forget where, even Democratic governors are not really rushing to codify what was in Roe in their states. And Republican governors are not, who are up for re-election, are not rushing to make abortion illegal. Why do you think there's a hesitancy when we're only, 5 or 6 months? Terry.
Well, legislating, if you do it right, is complicated and hard work because you've got to look at what's in the existing law in various sections, figure out what to fix, how to change it. You've got to deal with all kind of what-if questions that normally when an ideologue comes up with an idea, good or bad, left or right, they don't think about. But legislators, and we've got 132 of them, they got to think about those details because that makes a difference.
It's not because Mike DeWine would be running for re-election having just signed an anti-abortion law?
Or the legislators who don't want to really stir the pot much, they'd rather keep the focus on inflation and other national issues. So yes, there's politics and politics.
All right. The race for U.S. Senate here in Ohio is getting some national attention, some increased national attention. One, it's because it's an open seat, of course. Rob Portman is not running. Two, J.D. Vance is a unique and nationally known candidate. And three, his Democratic opponent is running a unique campaign. Take, for example, this ad. But remember first, Tim Ryan is a Democrat.
Congressman Ryan, you've been a jobs creator. You've been tough on China.
You on the stump and you talk bread and butter issues, economy, kitchen table issues.
Tim Ryan, somebody who is obviously pitching some of the more moderate ideas.
Watch, for example, what happened when Congressman Tim Ryan tried to remind his fellow Democrats that most Americans don't actually support open borders.
Well, that's right. You're very moderate.
Healthcare, bread and butter
you're
stuff.
hanging out in the middle like most of us are.
I'm Tim Ryan, and I approve this message.
Unique it is. Derek Clay, you have run and worked on many campaigns. Would you ever, as a Democrat, would you ever think of using just Fox News in one of your ads?
Well, listen, I think that Tim Ryan is running a very smart campaign. I've said on this program before that he's the original America First candidate. He lives in a district that is blue collar, hardworking people, and he understands what it takes to win this race. I mean, he's been in Congress for over a decade, a couple decades, and he's one that understands that you got to get out and talk with people. You have to talk with not only your base, but you have to talk to the people that are still on the fence about you, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Andrew, he raised $9 million in the last quarter, double what he did in the first quarter. Is it working?
It's hard to say. Polls in the race, to the extent that they can be trusted to model the electorate accurately in Ohio especially, say the race is tied or close. And it's interesting because, that's measuring an environment where one candidate is spending $6 million on ads. The other candidate's kind of quietly fundraising or whatever J.D. Vance has been up to. So that's certainly not going to be the case when people are actually voting. And so it's difficult to really draw too much from it. However, I think that something that's really important to watch in this is that national money has not been involved in this race at all. They've, I think, been prioritizing other states that are kind of more competitive, or at least assessed to be so. And so if you start seeing that showing up, I think that's a sign that people in the know with, controlling the deep checkbooks and all of that stuff are starting to change how they view the race. So that's always the thing that I'm going to look for.
So Andy, could this try to create buzz? I mean, he's right. He's spending a lot of money. He spent, $10 million already, and it was not before the 4th of July on campaigns.
Yeah, I think Tim Ryan and his campaign staff see that if you're going to win Ohio, you have to run a different race than maybe other Democrats have in the past since Donald Trump started running. And so that's sort of a new playbook that we're seeing right now. And I think it's, once again, another sort of test balloon of where do the politics land here in Ohio. If Tim Ryan's message really does reach voters, especially in like the Mahoning Valley area, if he can flip that back to blue and then get a big turnout in the other urban areas, I guess maybe that proves that the game plan could work for Democrats.
J.D. Vance he's a newcomer to Ohio politics. But are Republicans worried about what Ryan's tactics are and J.D. Vance's so far failure to respond?
Well, it's a big gamble because, as one experienced Democrat put it to me, ultimately, do you think Trump voters are going to believe he's really Trump-esque? And also, that ad, you probably played it as much. He didn't buy that much on there. He just did it to get a media spin and to get you to play the commercial. Yeah. But in reality, he's gambling. But really, this race comes down to what I call one man, one vote. Unless Chuck Schumer is willing to write a $20 million check to fund his campaign, he's really not going to go anywhere because ultimately Vance will get and raise the money.
Listen, for Tim Ryan or Congressman Ryan to be 2 points ahead at this stage in the game right now, he is outpacing J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance is not raising money. Now, of course, he's going to come in at the last minute, and they're both going to have a barrage of commercials, but Tim Ryan is owning this race right now, and he's going to win it. You heard it here first.
I mean, we haven't heard from J.D. Vance. The campaign finance numbers will come out Friday night at midnight, so we'll get an idea of how much money he's raised, but he's not been on the trail these too visibly in Ohio, Terry. Some Republicans are getting a little worried, aren't they?
Well, in case you missed it, Derek, it's summertime, and most people, after the bloody, ugly May primary we had, are happy to have a rest and happy to tune it out. But when people start paying attention in September, that's when the real campaign begins. And Tim Ryan's big problem is he endorsed Joe Biden for president in 2019, right after he dropped out when he failed to get any votes nationally, and he's been 100% rubber stamp vote for Joe Biden's program. So that's gonna, the Biden thing is gonna sink him.
But J.D. Vance has basically denounced your savior, Donald Trump, and now has gotten back on the team with him. So he's going to be looked upon as a flip-flopper.
I'll be happy to do a little wager with you and happy to collect the money after Election Day.
My prediction is that next Fox News ad from Tim Ryan we'll have the grainy black and white video, perhaps, anyway. American Electric Power went before the state utility regulators this week to explain why it intentionally turned off electricity to 250,000 Columbus area residents last month. AEP told the PUCO it was a combination of the laws of physics, the need to protect its central Ohio grid. It only had 5 minutes to make a decision, and it's a very rare occurrence. The last time it happened was 9 years ago. The PUCO says it will continue to study the situation. Andy Chow, is that good enough for consumer advocates?
It is not good enough for consumer advocates. The Office of the Ohio Consumers Counsel is asking for an extensive investigation into what happened with the AEP and the decisions that AEP and PJM made. That would include hiring an independent auditor, having public hearings. The Consumers Counsel wants to give the community ample amount of time to talk about the impact that happened to them. Remember when these forced outages happened, so not necessarily reliability issues to the transmission of houses in central Ohio, the forced outages happened to offset any load that was going on at a substation. And a lot of those neighborhoods were low-income neighborhoods, high-risk neighborhoods. They lost a lot of food because it's spoiled, because the refrigerators couldn't run. There's a big impact here. The Consumers Counsel wants a bigger investigation into it.
Now, AEP says it wasn't the affluence of the neighborhood. It was just what they were told to shut off. And there were some more affluent neighborhoods that were affected. It seemed like it was older neighborhoods, which tend to be more low income. Terry Casey, you lost power for a long time. Is that explanation good enough?
No, it's not. And here's the real question. There's a 13-state grid that supposedly told AEP, a big national corporation, what to do. And then later, as I noted on the show 2 weeks ago, I talked to one of the AEP officials, and he explained to me, we switched on Ohio Health and University Hospital afterwards, we realized we didn't want them shut off. Well, if you could switch them back on, why not switch off some other people? There really need to be some hard questions, because legally, AEP is supposed to build into their worst case an extra 25% reserve. Where was that reserve? Who was in charge? How were they operating? PUCO needs to keep digging.
Derek, it seems like it comes down to the health of the grid, and there's nothing they can do. I guess they can upgrade the grid, though, right?
Well, I mean, that's a great point that you bring out. I mean, it's unfortunate that this happened, and there should be an investigation to look into, exactly what happened and why it happened. But the bigger issue is our grid is very vulnerable, and it's been vulnerable for a long time. And AEP and other electric companies around the state, they need to really do a deep dive assessment as to what they need to do to make sure our grid is reliable, even in times of bad weather or emergencies.
So when you look at your electric bills, the one cost that continues to go up is the transmission fee, and that's for reliability. So a lot of people are upset that if we're paying so much, hundreds of millions of dollars collectively in transmission fees, then why are there still reliability issues?
And leading up to this, AEP was bragging how they'd spent billions of dollars and how they had such a smart grid. Well, it sounds like the grid didn't get out of kindergarten because it failed.
Lawmakers, Andrew, do they take up this cause and have independent investigations of their own, do you think?
I mean, I think it's more of a regulatory issue, honestly, and this has been an issue for a long time where commissioners of the PUCO have been seen as not being friendly to consumers, being too cozy with the industry, at least according to the advocates of consumers and stuff like that. So I think it's more of an issue like in that arena, and it highlights just sort of that ongoing criticism that you've been hearing in Ohio for a long time.
So Andy, where does it go? Wait another 9 years till it happens again?
Well, I think there is maybe, a good chance that there could be a further investigation into this. Terry mentioned a lot of the protocols that happen. Why did you keep Ohio Health on? Why do you keep other places on and take other people off? And it's really interesting to see what kind of review there will be into those protocols.
Yeah. All right, time now for our final off-the-record parting shots, and Derek Clay, you're up first.
Well, we had an exciting announcement with a partnership between the City of Columbus, Columbus Recreation and Parks Commission, and the Columbus Crew to build a sports park at Kilbourne Run Park. It's going to be a state-of-the-art facility and one to be proud of.
All right, that was supposed to be at the Crew Stadium, and they moved it.
It still might be at the Crew Stadium, depending if the state signs a lease.
A little controversial there. Terry.
Mayor Ginther wants to do away with civil service testing and promotions for police, fire, even recreation leaders. And there's some people raising a question. They ought to look at the Ohio Constitution, Article 15, Section 10, and in part of it says that appointments and promotions in the civil service, including cities, shall be made according to merit and fitness by competitive examinations. So I think some people at City Hall ought to look carefully at what they're trying to do.
Andrew.
So I went to jail this week, just to share that with everyone. The Franklin County Commissioners and Sheriff's Office dedicated a new jail facility. Is very nice, which is a weird thing to say about a jail. But the reason why I was there is that in Cuyahoga County in Cleveland, where my colleagues work and all of that, they are trying to figure out what they're going to do about their own jail situation. And so they're looking at Franklin County's facility, and it was very interesting. So I also recommend that people look up me on Twitter and check out my story and read the captions for the photos. It took me a long time to write. So,
but you didn't stay there long.
Yeah, fortunately, I was able to leave after a couple hours.
There you go. Andy.
Back to the U.S. Senate race, I got to talk to Tim Ryan and J.D. Vance about the issue of inflation. J.D. Vance says that he wants to reduce energy regulations, saying that would help the problem. Tim Ryan wants tax cuts.
Interesting. I predict we will see J.D. Vance on TV, at least making appearances sometime in the next couple of weeks to blunt some of this, depending on how his campaign finance report comes out this weekend. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. We ask you to continue the conversation on Facebook. You can also watch us on demand anytime you want on our website, WOSU.org, or through the PBS video app. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.